desert sky was burning down into twilight when the cowboy first heard the cries, faint, broken, carried by the wind like the thin threads of a prayer. He pulled the reins, slowing his horse to a cautious trot, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon where the world stretched wide and merciless, an ocean of sand and sagebrush painted in fading gold. The West was no place for the weak, no place for mercy. And yet mercy was the only thing keeping him in the saddle that evening. He had buried too many regrets, too many ghosts that whispered to him in the long hours between dusk and dawn. He had sworn to himself that he would never again ride into trouble for strangers. But when he heard that sound, the unmistakable voice of terror, of youth, of innocence begging for deliverance, and his heart betrayed him. He spurred the horse forward, hooves pounding the cracked earth, dust rising behind like smoke from a fire. The cries grew louder, desperate, tangled with the cruel laughter of men. Soon he saw them. 2 Apache girls no older than 16 stumbling through the desert scrub, their dark hair tangled, faces streaked with dirt and fear. Behind them thundered 3 riders armed with rifles and greed in their eyes. The cowboy's blood surged hot with fury. He recognized the kind of men they were: bounty hunters, mercenaries without conscience, wolves wearing the clothes of men. He had ridden with such men once long ago before he learned how easily silver could rot a man's soul. Without thinking, he pulled the rifle from its leather scabbard and fired a warning shot into the evening air. The sound cracked across the valley like judgment. The riders jerked in surprise, curses spilling from their mouths. "Ride, girls!" the cowboy shouted, his voice steady, commanding. The girls obeyed, their bare feet bleeding against the stones as they fled toward him. The bounty hunters turned their horses, glaring at the lone figure who now blocked their pursuit. "You best ride on, stranger," one of them sneered, his voice thick with whiskey and arrogance. "Those are runaways worth a fine price to the man who takes them back." The cowboy's gaze hardened, his weathered face carved in shadow. "They're not yours to take." A tense silence hung in the air, broken only by the restless shifting of horses. Then with a cruel grin, the lead rider spat into the dust. "Then they're yours to die for." The rifles came up. The cowboy didn't hesitate. His fingers squeezed the trigger and the desert exploded in thunder and smoke. The battle was quick, violent, merciless. The cowboy moved like a man possessed, his shots sharp and unerring. One bounty hunter fell from his saddle, clutching his chest. Another cursed, wheeled his horse, and fired back. But the cowboy's return shot split the night with finality. The last man, pale with fear, spurred his horse and vanished into the gathering darkness. The girls collapsed at the cowboy's feet, gasping, their small shoulders heaving. One clutched the other, whispering words in Apache the cowboy could not understand, though he knew the meaning well enough. Prayers of thanks, cries of disbelief that they had survived another night. He dismounted, his boots crunching against the gravel, and knelt beside them. "You're safe now," he murmured, though the words felt heavy in his mouth. Safe was a fragile promise in the West. The elder of the 2 raised her eyes to him, dark and blazing despite the tears streaking her face. "They will come again," she said in broken English. "Others will come." The cowboy nodded, knowing she spoke truth. He glanced at the fallen bodies, already lying cold in the dirt, and felt the weight of what he had done pressing against his soul. This was not the kind of trouble a man could walk away from. But when the younger girl, no more than 12, reached out her trembling hand and clutched his, he knew he had no choice but to see it through. "Come," he said softly, lifting them to their feet. "We can't stay here." They rode through the deepening night, the 2 girls clinging to the back of his horse, their thin arms wrapped around his waist. The desert wind cut sharp, carrying the scent of mesquite and dust, but the cowboy felt the weight of their trust pressed against him like a brand. As the stars opened wide above them, the elder girl finally spoke again. "Our mother will find us," she whispered, her voice both hope and warning. "She always finds us." The cowboy's grip on the reins tightened. He had heard stories of Apache mothers, fierce, unyielding, bound by blood and vengeance. He did not know what kind of woman would come for these girls, but he knew she would come. And with her would come a reckoning he could not yet see. The night had grown heavy by the time the cowboy found a place to rest, tucked away in a narrow ravine, where cottonwoods clung to a thin ribbon of water. He built a small fire that cracked and hissed against the chill air. The girls huddled close, their faces illuminated by the wavering glow. Exhaustion had carved lines into their young features, but fear still kept their eyes wide and restless. The cowboy sat apart, his rifle across his lap, staring into the flames as though answers might be written there. He could not stop replaying the gunfight in his mind. The way the men fell, the echo of bullets across the desert, the final look of fear on the rider who fled. Trouble had been set loose tonight, and it would not rest until it found him again. "Do you have a name?" the elder girl asked suddenly. Her voice trembled but carried a stubborn strength as though she were testing him. The cowboy shifted, lifting his eyes to hers. "People call me Cole," he said after a pause, though the name sat awkwardly on his tongue. It was the name he had used for years, but it was not the one he had been born with. Names had a way of being lost in the West, traded for silence and survival. The girl nodded as if committing it to memory. "I am Talia," she said. Then with a touch of pride, she motioned to her sister. "And this is Luma." The younger girl gave a faint smile, though her eyes darted nervously at the shadows pressing beyond the firelight. Cole inclined his head. "Talia, Luma, you both did brave tonight." Talia's gaze hardened. "We were not brave. We were desperate. That is different." Her words stung with truth, and Cole found himself respecting her more for it. The fire crackled and silence stretched between them, filled only by the whispers of night creatures and the low murmur of the creek. Talia seemed to wrestle with something unspoken until finally she said, "Our mother will come for us. She always does." Cole studied her, the conviction in her tone striking deeper than the words themselves. There was no doubt in her voice, no hesitation. He had known many men and women who spoke of faith, of gods or destiny. But this was something different. Talia spoke of her mother as though she were both spirit and storm, an unstoppable force that could bend the world to her will. "Then I'll see you safe until she comes," Cole said simply. Talia tilted her head, her dark eyes narrowing. "Safe for us. But what of you?" Before Cole could answer, the wind shifted. A faint rustle moved through the cottonwoods, followed by the unmistakable crunch of footsteps over stone. His hand tightened on the rifle. The girls stiffened, clutching each other. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall and commanding. She stepped into the light, and the world seemed to draw in around her. Her face was strong, lined with age and hardship, but her eyes blazed with the fire of the earth itself. Long black hair, streaked with silver, fell over her shoulders. She wore a deerskin dress decorated with beads that glimmered in the firelight, and across her back hung a bow of carved ash wood, its string taut as vengeance. "Mother," Talia breathed, her voice breaking. The woman's gaze swept over the girls first, drinking them in, confirming they were whole. Then her eyes lifted to Cole, and in them was no gratitude, no softness, only the cool weight of judgment. "You saved them," she said in careful English, her voice low and steady, carrying the weight of mountains. "But why?" Cole rose slowly, rifle still in hand, though lowered at his side. "Because they needed saving." A silence followed, deep and heavy, as if the desert itself held its breath. The woman stepped closer, her shadow long against the fire. "Men do not risk their lives for Apache girls," she said. "Not unless they want something." Cole met her gaze without flinching. "I wanted them alive. That's all." For a long moment, the woman studied him as though trying to strip the truth from his skin. Then, with a nod, she placed her hands gently on her daughter's shoulders. Talia pressed into her side while Luma clutched at her hand, tears of relief spilling freely now. "I am Naya," the woman said at last. "Their mother." The tension eased, but not fully. Naya's presence filled the ravine like the storm clouds that gather before lightning strikes. Cole felt himself shrinking beneath her gaze, though he stood taller than most men. She crouched by the fire, warming her hands. Her daughters curled close beside her. "You killed men tonight," she said softly, though it was not a question. "They gave me no choice," Cole replied. Naya's lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile, though it did not reach her eyes. "There is always a choice." Her words landed heavy, stirring old memories in Cole's heart. Nights of blood and regret, times when he had chosen wrongly and paid dearly for it. But before he could answer, Naya reached into the pouch at her side and drew out a small bundle wrapped in deerskin. She set it on the ground between them with reverence. "You saved my daughters," she said, her voice slow and deliberate. "Tomorrow I will give you a reward, but it will not be what you expect." Cole stared at the bundle, then at her, unsure if he should feel honored or unsettled. "What kind of reward?" Naya's eyes glittered in the firelight, sharp as obsidian. "One that will test the man you are." And with that, the fire cracked loud, sending a shower of sparks into the night sky. The girls leaned against their mother, safe at last. But Cole lay awake until dawn, haunted not by the men he had killed, but by the promise of a reward he did not understand, and the fear that it would change everything. Morning broke slow and heavy, the pale light spilling across the desert like milk over stone. Cole had not slept much, haunted by the words Naya had spoken, haunted by the way her eyes seemed to pierce straight through him. He had thought saving the girls was the end of his duty, but now he knew it was only the beginning. The small camp had already stirred. Talia knelt by the creek washing her face, her long hair dripping like black silk. Luma chased a grasshopper through the tall reeds, laughter bubbling from her chest for the first time since Cole had met her. It was a sound that startled him, fragile, almost out of place in this world of grit and blood. Naya sat close to the fire, silent, grinding herbs in a small stone bowl. Her movements were precise, graceful, carrying the weight of ritual. Cole watched her for a long moment, his chest tightening with something he did not wish to name. There was a strength in her, yes, but also a grief that clung to her like a shadow. She was a woman carved by loss, yet unbroken by it. She glanced up suddenly, catching him staring, and for the briefest moment their eyes held. Then she looked away, her hands never pausing their work. "You promised a reward," Cole said finally, breaking the silence. Naya's lips pressed thin. She tied the pouch of herbs with a strip of sinew and set it aside before she answered. "My daughters live because of you," she said. "In our way, that means you are bound to us, but for a time." Cole frowned. "Bound?" "Yes," she said simply. "You will walk with us, eat with us, fight with us until the spirits say otherwise." Her tone was calm, but the weight of it settled on Cole like a stone. He had not planned on staying. He had no home to return to, but he had no wish to be entangled in another's life either. Yet he could not find the words to refuse. Talia straightened from the creek and looked at him, her young face serious. "The spirits chose you, Cowboy. If you leave us now, others will find us. And then your fight last night will mean nothing." Cole's jaw tightened. She was right, though he hated to admit it. "I'm no spirit's chosen," he muttered. But the words felt hollow even to him. The days that followed blurred into a strange rhythm. Cole traveled with them across the rugged hills and through dry arroyos where the sun beat mercilessly down. He hunted rabbits, showed Luma how to set snares, and taught Talia how to better aim a sling she carried at her waist. In turn, Naya shared her knowledge of the land, which plants soothed fever, which rocks held water beneath them, which stars guided safest at night. The more time Cole spent with them, the more the walls around his heart began to crack. Luma's laughter reminded him of a sister he had lost long ago, taken by sickness before he ever rode west. Talia's fierce determination stirred something like pride in him, as if he were watching a daughter of his own grow strong. And Naya unsettled him most of all. She spoke little, but when she did, her words carried a weight he could not ignore. She challenged him, questioned his choices, forced him to confront parts of himself he had long buried. At night, when the fire burned low and the stars stretched endless overhead, Cole would catch himself watching the curve of her face in the firelight, the way her eyes glimmered like coals even in silence. He told himself it was nothing, just respect, just the bond of shared danger. But deep down he knew it was more, and it terrified him. The world, however, did not allow such fragile peace to last. One afternoon, as they rested near a ridge overlooking the valley, dust rose on the horizon. Riders, 4, maybe 5, moving fast, their horses kicking up dirt. Cole's gut tightened. He knew that kind of ride, a hunting party and not the kind that chased deer. "We've been followed," he said grimly. Naya's eyes narrowed. "White men?" Cole studied the movement. The glint of rifles caught the sun. "Yes, and armed." Talia stiffened, reaching for Luma's hand. "They'll take us again." "Not if I can help it," Cole growled, pulling his rifle free. But Naya placed a hand on his arm, her touch firm, commanding. "We do not run yet. First we listen." The riders drew closer, their shouts carried by the wind. One voice rose above the others, and a harsh, familiar. Cole's stomach turned when he recognized it. The sheriff. Sheriff Hal Morgan was a man Cole knew too well. Once they had ridden together, chasing bounties across the borderlands, drinking whiskey in the same saloons, laughing at the same bloody tales. But where Cole had grown weary of the killing, Hal had only sharpened his hunger for it. Now he heard Hal's voice ringing across the valley. "Cole, I know you're out there. You think you can hide behind savages, but the law's coming down on you. Hand over the girls and maybe I'll let you live." The words twisted like a knife. Cole felt Talia's eyes on him wide with fear. Luma pressed into her sister's side, trembling. Naya's expression hardened, cold as stone. "This man knows you," she said flatly. Cole nodded, shame burning in his chest. "We rode together once. He's dangerous, Naya. More dangerous than the men from before. And now he hunts my daughters because of you," she said. There was no accusation in her tone, only truth, which stung worse. Cole gritted his teeth. "Then it's me he wants. I'll draw him off," but Naya shook her head. "You saved them. You do not get to choose their fate or mine. We fight together." Their eyes locked, and for the first time Cole felt not just the weight of her judgment but the flicker of something else. Trust. Fragile, grudging, but real. As the riders crested the ridge, Cole raised his rifle and Naya strung her bow with steady hands. Talia gripped a stone in her sling, and even little Luma picked up a sharpened stick, her lips pressed tight with determination. Cole's heart swelled with a strange, fierce pride. They were no helpless family. They were warriors in their own right. And standing among them for the first time in years, he felt like he might still be a man worth saving. But Hal's voice cut through the air once more, sharp as a whip. "Last chance, Cole. Hand them over or we'll burn you out of this land." And in that moment, Cole knew there was no turning back. Whatever bound him to these women, it would not be broken by fear. The ridge held its breath as the sheriff and his men appeared against the burning horizon. 5 silhouettes cut sharp against the sun. Their rifles gleamed, the glint of metal flashing like the eyes of wolves closing in on wounded prey. Cole stood with his rifle braced against his shoulder, Naya steady at his side. Talia and Luma crouched low behind them, waiting for the storm to break. Sheriff Hal Morgan raised a hand, and his posse slowed, circling like buzzards scenting death. His voice rang out hard and mocking. "Cole Dawson," he called. "Never thought I'd find you hiding with women and children. You've fallen far, old friend." The words hit Cole like a lash. He had not heard that name spoken in years. Not since he'd left behind the life of blood money and cold-hearted lawmen. The name was a chain to his past, a reminder of every bounty collected, every corpse left in the dust. Cole's jaw tightened. "You don't belong here, Hal." Hal laughed, a bitter sound. "Don't belong? This land is crawling with savages, and you've gone soft enough to defend them. I belong here more than you do." The men behind him jeered, their rifles shifting restlessly. The air was thick with violence, as though the earth itself leaned forward to see who would strike first. Naya spoke then, her voice sharp as flint. "These are my daughters. No law of yours can claim them." Hal's grin widened, cruel. "Lady, the only law that matters out here is a gun, and I've got more of them than you do." Cole's finger itched on the trigger, but Naya's hand pressed against his arm, steadying him. Her eyes, dark and unreadable, told him to wait, but waiting only gave Hal time to reveal his venom. "Truth is, I don't care about those girls," he said, "but the ranchers down south, they do. They say the Apache are stealing cattle, burning fences, making trouble. They'll pay good coin for proof someone's keeping the savages in line. And 2 little girls, scared and tamed, worth more alive than dead." Luma whimpered, clutching Talia's hand. Talia's eyes blazed with fury, her grip tight on the sling at her waist. Cole felt rage flood his chest. "They're not for sale," he growled. Hal's grin turned cold. "Everything's for sale, Cole, even you. Especially you." And with that, he snapped his hand down. Gunfire split the air. The world erupted in chaos. Cole's rifle roared, dropping one of Hal's men before the first bullet whistled past his head. Naya's bow sang, an arrow slicing clean through the throat of another rider, who toppled from his saddle clutching at blood that poured like dark wine. The posse scattered, firing from horseback, bullets sparking against stone. Talia hurled a rock with her sling, striking a rider's face and sending him reeling. Luma crouched low, teeth clenched, too young for such terror but too stubborn to break. Cole fought like a man possessed, each shot a brutal echo of his past life. But this time, it wasn't bounty money that drove him. It was the sight of Talia shielding her sister, of Naya standing tall against the storm. It was the desperate need to protect something pure in a world that had long since rotted. Still, numbers war against them. The last of Hal's men pressed hard, circling, shouting. Hal himself rode closer, his rifle steady, his eyes locked on Cole. "You'll die for them," he shouted over the chaos. "And for what?" 2 girls who ain't yours? A woman who'll never trust you? The words stung because they rang too true, but Cole fired anyway, grazing Hall's shoulder, sending him cursing and wheeling his horse back. The fight dragged on until the ravine echoed with silence broken only by the crackle of flame and the groans of the dying. 3 of Hal's men lay dead in the dirt. The survivors fled, dragging their wounded behind them. Hal himself retreated last, his eyes burning with promise of vengeance. "This ain't over, Cole," he bellowed, his voice fading with distance. "You've made yourself an outlaw, and the law always wins." When the dust settled, the camp was in ruins. The fire had been scattered, packs trampled under hooves, blood staining the earth. Talia clutched Luma tight, tears streaking her face, though her jaw was set firm. Cole leaned against a rock, chest heaving, his rifle nearly spent. He looked at Naya, who stood tall and unflinching, though her arm bled from a shallow wound. "You should have let me draw them off," Cole said hoarsely. Naya's gaze cut into him. "And leave us to die? No. You fight with us now. You cannot choose otherwise." Her words carried no malice, only certainty, but they weighed on Cole like a chain he could not escape. That night, as they huddled in the wreckage of their camp, Talia broke the silence with a confession that shattered what little peace remained. "They found us because of me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Naya's head snapped toward her. "What do you mean?" Talia's eyes filled with shame, but she forced the words out. "Before they took us, before all of this, I wrote a letter to a place in the town, a mail-order agency. I thought maybe they would send someone for me, someone to marry me, take me away from hunger and fear." Naya's face drained of color, rage and sorrow battling in her expression. "You betrayed us," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "I only wanted a different life," Talia cried, tears spilling freely now. "I wanted Luma safe. I didn't know it would bring those men." The firelight flickered across their faces, Talia broken with guilt, Naya burning with fury, Cole stricken silent. The truth landed like a thunderclap. Talia's desperate hope had set the hounds on them. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Naya turned away, her shoulders shaking, her voice a whisper barely audible. "You have doomed us all." Cole felt the weight of it crush him. Talia's mistake had drawn Hal, but it was his choice to fight that kept the sheriff hunting them. Guilt knotted in his chest until he could hardly breathe. He wanted to speak, to say something to bridge the chasm opening between mother and daughter, but no words came. Instead, he stared into the fire, knowing that betrayal had entered their camp, and with it, the seeds of vengeance that would grow wild and bloody before the end. The storm rolled in like a beast from the north, howling through the canyons, rattling the cottonwoods until their bare limbs groaned. Snow fell heavy, thick flakes swirling across the land, burying the bloodstains of the last battle as if the earth itself wished to forget. Cole pulled his coat tighter and kept the fire alive with trembling hands, but the cold seeped through every seam. Beside him, Talia and Luma lay curled in blankets of deerskin, their faces pale with exhaustion. Naya sat apart, her dark eyes fixed on the storm outside the cave they had found, her face hard as carved stone. It had been 3 nights since the fight with Hal's men. 3 nights of silence broken only by the crack of wood in the fire and the girl's uneasy sleep. Talia had not spoken much since her confession. Guilt weighed her shoulders low, while her mother's silence carved deeper wounds than any words could. Cole tried more than once to bridge the space between them, but Naya would not relent. Her fury had cooled into something colder, a wall of disappointment immovable as the mountains. On the 4th night, the storm swelled to its fiercest. The wind screamed through the narrow cave mouth and snow piled high outside, trapping them in a frozen tomb. Cole fed the fire again, though their supply of wood was dwindling. "This won't last us," he muttered, more to himself than anyone. "If the storm holds, we'll need to break it." Naya's gaze flicked to him, sharp. "You mean leave the girls in the cold while you risk yourself?" "I mean if I don't, the fire dies and we all freeze," Cole answered, his voice steady but tight. Their eyes held, sparks snapping in the silence between them. And then slowly Naya's expression softened, if only by a fraction. "You take on burdens too easily," she murmured, "as if you can pay for all the wrong you've done with one more sacrifice." Cole's breath caught, the words slicing through him. "And what wrongs do you think you know of me?" Naya turned back to the fire, shadows cutting her face in half. "I know a man who carries guilt in his eyes, who fights not for honor but for atonement. I know that man because I have lived beside one like him before." Cole swallowed hard. "Your husband." The fire cracked and her silence was answer enough. Later, when the girls had drifted into uneasy sleep, Cole found himself drawn toward her. He sat across the fire, watching the flames dance across her face, and the words came unbidden, dragged from the hollow in his chest. "I had a family once," he said quietly. "A wife, a boy. Both gone now. Fever took them while I was off chasing coin. I wasn't there to hold her hand. Wasn't there to bury my boy proper. I buried myself instead, under whiskey, under gun smoke, under the law. I rode with men like Hal because I thought if I killed enough devils, maybe mine would stay quiet." His voice broke, but he forced it steady again. It never worked. Naya's eyes lifted to him, glimmering with something he could not name, pity or sorrow, or perhaps the faintest trace of kinship. "You cannot fight ghosts with more ghosts," she said softly. Cole nodded, a bitter smile tugging his lips. "No, but maybe I can fight for something living." Their eyes held across the flames, and for a moment the cave fell silent except for the storm's howl. Something fragile and dangerous passed between them. Not the fire of passion, but the slow, aching warmth of two souls who had both lost too much and yet still breathed. The storm raged on for days, and with it hunger gnawed at their bellies. Cole risked brief forays into the blizzard, returning with frozen rabbits or strips of bark that Naya boiled into bitter broth. Talia began to speak again, timidly, her guilt pouring out in whispered apologies to her mother. Naya answered little, but Cole noticed how her hand sometimes brushed her daughter's shoulder in the dark, wordless forgiveness flickering like the fire. But peace was fragile, and the world outside their cave still hunted them. On the fifth day, as the storm eased, the echo of hoofbeats carried faint through the snow. Cole tensed, rifle in hand, his heart pounding. Through the white veil of falling snow, riders appeared, 3, then 4, their figures blurred but unmistakable. They bore no rancher's brand, no outlaw's mask. These were lawmen, and at their head, riding tall despite the sling on his arm, was Hal Morgan, his voice carried harsh and triumphant. "Cole, I told you this wasn't over. I've brought the law with me this time. The governor himself put your name on a poster. Outlaw, murderer, kidnapper. You're worth more in chains than you ever were free." The words rang through Cole like a bell tolling the end. He knew the posters must be true. Hal would have made sure of it, painting him blacker than the devil. Naya's hand found his arm, fingers gripping tight. "What does he mean?" Cole's chest burned with shame. "He means I've been running too long, and now the law's finally caught up." Talia gasped. Luma pressed her face into her sister's shoulder, and Naya's eyes darkened like storm clouds. Hal's voice came again, sharp as a blade. "Here's your choice, Cole. Hand over the woman, her daughters too, if you like, and I'll see you walk free. The law don't care about them, only about you. Give me the savage and you live. Refuse, and you'll all die in this cave before dawn." The cave seemed to close in around him. Cole felt the weight of the ultimatum pressing down. His freedom or their lives, his ghosts whispered in the crackle of the fire, reminding him how easily he had failed those he loved before. Naya stared at him, her face unreadable, her grip still firm on his arm. "And what will you choose, Cole Dawson?" Her use of his true name cut deep, stripping him bare. Outside, Hal's men laughed, their rifles gleaming through the snow. The girls clung to their mother, eyes wide with terror. Cole lifted his rifle slowly, his hand steady though his heart trembled. "I'll choose the only thing worth dying for," he said, and with that, he stepped toward the mouth of the cave, ready to face the law, the storm, and the ghosts of his past, even if it meant sacrificing himself. Snow still drifted in the air, thick and silent, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. The cave mouth glowed faintly from the fire behind Cole, but all warmth had fled his bones. He stood in the storm, rifle in hand, facing the shadows of Hal Morgan and his men. Their horses snorted clouds of steam, restless, hungry for blood. "Last chance, Cole," Hal called, his voice carrying sharp over the wind. "Hand over the woman and you walk away a free man. Fight me and your bones will freeze here before sunrise." Cole's breath clouded in front of him, ragged but steady. He knew the weight of his past. He had carried it across every mile of desert and plain, but now, with Naya and her daughters behind him, he felt something he had not known in years. Purpose. "I've run long enough," he called back, his voice low but unshaken. "This is where it ends." Hal's laughter cut through the storm, cruel and mocking. "Then you'll die a fool, same as you lived." The rifles came up and the world shattered into fire. The first shot ripped through the snowstorm, a crack that echoed like thunder. Cole dropped to one knee, rifle steady, and fired. One of Hal's men toppled from his horse, snow blooming red beneath him. Naya's bow sang behind him, her arrow striking another clean through the chest. Talia hurled a stone with her sling, knocking a rider's weapon loose while Luma clung to her mother, her eyes wide with terror and defiance. Hal rode forward, his rifle blazing, bullets sparking against the stone near Cole's head. The storm swallowed sound, but the battle raged fierce. Cole moved with desperate precision, every shot a prayer, every breath a confession. The ghosts of his past seemed to ride with him, not as tormentors but as witnesses, urging him toward the man he had always longed to be. Still, numbers wore them down. For every man they dropped, another pressed closer. Hal dismounted, striding forward through the snow, his rifle steady, his grin savage. "You can't stop me, Cole. You never could. You're nothing but a broken gun hand clinging to scraps that don't belong to you." Cole rose, blood streaking his sleeve from a graze, his chest heaving. "They belong to themselves, and I'll die before I let you take them." Their eyes locked, years of brotherhood and betrayal hanging in the space between them. Then Hal raised his rifle. The shot came swift, but it was not Cole who fell. Naya leapt forward, shoving him aside, the bullet tearing through her shoulder. She crumpled into the snow, blood blooming dark against white. "Mother!" Talia screamed, rushing to her side. Rage unlike anything Cole had ever known roared through him. He surged to his feet, firing with a fury that drove Hal back step by step. The sheriff stumbled, his grin faltering, his eyes narrowing with sudden fear. "You'll pay for that," Cole snarled, his voice low, deadly. Hal fired again, missing in his haste. Cole's return shot struck true, slamming into Hal's chest. The sheriff staggered, dropped his rifle, and fell to his knees, snow swallowing him whole. For a moment, the world went still. The last of Hal's men scattered, fleeing into the storm, their courage broken. Silence settled, heavy and final. Cole dropped his rifle and fell to Naya's side. She was pale, her breath shallow, but her eyes still burned with fire. Talia pressed her hands against the wound, sobbing, while Luma clung to her arm. "You should have let me take it," Cole whispered, his voice breaking. Naya shook her head weakly, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "This is my choice. My daughters live. That is enough." Her hand found his, gripping tight with surprising strength. "You gave me more than a reward, Cole Dawson. You gave me hope." Tears blurred his vision, falling hot against the frozen ground. "Don't you die on me now," he pleaded. "Not after all this." Her eyes softened, her voice fading. "Then live for me, live for them, and do not run anymore." Her hand slipped from his, falling limp. Cole bowed his head, the storm howling around him, his heart breaking under the weight of her sacrifice. They buried her at dawn, beneath the cottonwoods where the snow lay thick but soft. Talia and Luma wept quietly, their small hands clinging to Cole's as he carved a crude marker from stone. When it was done, he stood over the grave, the wind tugging at his coat, the ache in his chest deeper than any wound. "I'll keep them safe," he murmured. "I swear it." The words were not just a promise to Naya, but to himself, a vow to lay down the ghosts of his past and carry forward something better. Days later, word spread through the territory. Hal Morgan was dead, struck down in a storm by the very outlaw he once rode beside. Some called Cole a murderer, others whispered of him as a savior. But among the Apache, and in the hearts of two young girls who had lost much and gained one stubborn guardian, he became something else entirely. A legend. The cowboy who had stood against the law, against the storm, and against his own demons, not for gold or glory, but for love, for honor, and for redemption.